Recorded Monday, February 28th, 2011. Today we're talking recall. It's the Wild Paw Dog Podcast, the podcast that helps you improve the quality of life with your four-legged friend. Episode 19. And today, the show's sponsored by dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind. I'm John Buskell in Sweden.
And I'm Karen Wild. I'm in the UK, near Peterborough, for any of you who live in the East Midlands. Most people don't even know where it is, John.
No, I was looking at the traffic for where people are downloading and the podcasts, and I saw that people were downloading from the States, from Sweden, from Canada. So we've got listeners all over the place. And if you're a regular listener, thanks for coming back. And if you're a new listener, I hope you get a lot out of this show. Karen and I like to talk about all things dog. And Karen is a canine behaviourist in the UK, and she gives lots of good tips for training and improving the life of dogs with their people.
Absolutely right. And I think that's one of the most important things, and it affects everyone who owns a pet. You know, it's not just a one-way relationship, is it, John?
No, exactly. So I mentioned in the intro there, Karen, we're talking recall today. Tell us about that.
But first, John, I want to ask you how you got on with last week's challenge when we talked about lead training. So for those of you that haven't downloaded it yet, last week's podcast, we talked all about keeping your dog on a loose lead. And I wanted to hear from John after he tried the technique that I described with his puppies. How did you get on?
Brilliant. Absolutely awesome.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely awesome. Trying to get 3 5.5, 6-month-old Bassets to walk properly on the lead. Bearing in mind they're scent hounds, always want to put their nose down to the ground. Stacks of snow here, so all the pee is frozen, and that's, Basset hound heaven. I did exactly like you said, Karen. I trained them one at a time. It took Dearborn 2 walks to get the hang of it. It took Digby, he picked it up within about 3 minutes and never pulled me again. Smudge, took Smudge about 2-3 walks before she got it, and now I just walked this morning all 3 of them together using the same technique, and although a little bit Digby and Smudge were pulling towards to try and find the scent, as long as I called them back to me with my recall cue, and then got them back right near my legs, and then I said, walk with me, and off they came. I've got 3.
I'm so pleased.
Yeah, it's brilliant because I've got 3 older ones, and now I'm like, whoa, I prefer walking the pups. They are so awesome.
Yeah, so I have to try it on the older ones next.
Exactly. So Karen, that was some brilliant tips there. And if anyone else tried it, if anyone else has had some success, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, we've had some video sent to us from somebody who's had a lot of success with it. So I'm going to try and put that on the blog, but I'll put it on the one that relates to the lead walking. So again, guys, if you're listening and you want to have a look, by the end of this week, it will be up there, and you'll be able to go back. But do go back to the lead walking blog, because this one is all about, like we said, all about recall.
Oh, that's a really difficult one. And of course, it's so important for the safety of your dog, isn't it?
It is, and it's also really important for their well-being that you can actually let your dog go out and about and have a sniff around. And next to lead pulling, I think this is the one, the other big thing that people really just don't know what to do. And they always say, if they're complaining about their dogs, they say, I daren't let the dog off the lead. He will not come back. They like everybody else except me, and I daren't do it, or I can sort of let them off if we're somewhere where I can see them. But if we're anywhere where there's a person on the horizon, forget it. And I think you get grades of this. You get some people that daren't let their dog off the lead at all, to some people that kind of do in some places, like I said, to a very small minority of people, in fact, that will actually trust their dog and trust themselves enough to let the dog just sort of have a run around. So my aim today is to give you the tools, again, part of my amazing dog training toolkit thing that every owner should have. When I say amazing, it's not amazing, it's just easy, but it's amazingly easy. The toolkit that you have to get a really good relationship with your dog, so that you can trust them to let them off, to take them anywhere, to do all these things that are part of your everyday life, because your dog is part of your everyday life and they're part of your family. So, the first thing that we have to look at, is why. And I'm a big fan of this why, don't you, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Why won't your dog come back?
What is the reason? And most people will say something like, they'll come up with a reason like, oh, I'm not good enough, or, oh, it's my fault, I didn't train them when they were a puppy. Or they might say, yeah, they don't listen, they've got selective deafness. And yeah, I know all those feelings. So I'm not saying that's not truthful, because I think that is. But, let's break it down even further and start being a bit more scientific about it. Again, take away the emotion, take away the fact that it's your own dog. Let's look at it generally. Is it the dog just isn't interested? They might just not be interested in you. It might be that they're not interested in what you've got in your hand. But don't forget the first thing, and you're not allowed to blame yourself, you are there all the time. Most of the things the dog gets to do during the day are to do with you. So they're not necessarily going to think you're the top, reward when you're out and about, when you're faced with lots of other things that they don't get every day. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. If the dog's not interested, yes, you can try and spice it up, get some food, get a toy. And some dogs, yes, they will respond to that. No reason why not. But we're really aiming at the nugget of dogs that really aren't interested in any of that either. So first of all, if they're not interested, there's a familiarity issue there. So don't worry about that. The second thing is, it could be that your dog is actually quite scared. Now I know, and I'm sure you know as well, that frustration and fear when your dog decides, you perhaps let them off the lead when they're a puppy, or you've given it a bit of a chance, and then they just will not come back. And you have that horror feeling of, there's a road nearby, or there's another dog and they don't look very nice, or this person shouted at me, or, and when the dog comes back, you are cross. From arranging mildly annoyed up to absolutely furious. And of course, the dog will pick that up, even if you don't show it. And I know, hand on heart, we can probably all of us admit to being really like, why did you run off? The dog is going to look at that on the face of it and think, you are scary. I don't like that. I'm not coming back to you because your body language looks threatening. You're huffing and puffing. You're generally giving me the fishy eye and not very happy. So the dog will remember that. So in the past, it might be that you've done something and the dog's actually quite nervous of coming back to you. I'll tell you when you see that, John. When your dog comes running back and they get to, I don't know, maybe around about 6 feet away, and they kind of do what I call a fly past. Yeah. They come zooming back to you and then they go, and they go round behind you. Yeah. Usually, if I see that with an owner and their dog, I know that the dog's kind of, it wants to come back, but actually it's afraid of the last little bit. Yeah. There's lots of reasons for that, but that's definitely one of the things I would then start to look at with the owner. Next one is that they might not like being put back on the lead and having their fun spoiled, of course. But sorry, John, you were going to say.
No, I was going to say, because, recall is very important for me too. I've got 3 young dogs out there, and I go outside, and my area is not fenced in. I've got a fenced in area for them, but I just take them out into I've got a very, very big garden, but there is a road right at the end, and they tear around. And ever since they were small, I've worked with recall. And of these 3 dogs, they've all had the same, they've been raised in the same way, and 2 of them will rush back to me. It's like it's absolute party time to come back to me, because that's what I've always tried to work on, is that the minute that you come back to me, it's absolute, wonderful. But one of them, he stops about half a meter away. He rushes back and then he stops. And so with him, I'm having to work out. And I can tell you that with the other 2, I'm so pleased. One of them last night, Dearborn, we're out in the road, or we get to the road because my neighbour across the other side comes over, and they're like, oh, let's go and say hello. And there are no cars around here, really. But 2 people walk by. Dearborn thinks, oh, he charges down the road after them. He is about 25 metres from them. And then I gave him the signal. All my dogs come to a train to come with a whistle. And I gave him the whistle. He stopped instantly, turned around, and at full pelt ran back to me. And that to me is a sign of I've been lucky in my training. I would never trust
celebratory moment.
Yeah. I don't think you can ever trust it 100%. You can't trust it 100%, no matter what you say about your dog. But, I think what you were just saying there, Karen, there are some dogs that, you've obviously done something that they hesitate just before they get to you. They skirt around you, they stop and look at you. And that's what that's my own personal challenge this week. is to work on getting him to come.
This is all part of breaking it down into sections, isn't it? I mean, more than one dog, they're probably behaving differently for different reasons. So again, breaking it down into sections, look at what kind of dog have you got in front of you. Don't worry about the one that can do it straight away. Think about the one that can't do it and think, is it that they've got a very strong prey drive? Have you got the kind of dog that constantly steals food, is always on the hunt when you're out, nose to the ground, scoffing leftovers, looking for scraps on the floor, picking up rubbish? Don't forget that we've said this time and time again, there might be rabbits around that you can't see what they smell like. You just can't see it. So you might have a dog like that. So that is one part. You might also have a dog that has a very high social instinct, very, very socially driven. So they see another person or another dog and they're going for, a bit of fun. They're going to go and see what this novelty is. So that's another part. You might have a dog that's sensitive and fearful, in which case they might be chasing somebody away, which is not great. And you definitely need help if you're going to do that. If you've got a dog that does that, they might be nervous and they might be nervous of you. So that's the other part. And then you might have a dog who is brave and fearless, who doesn't really care, who likes to explore, who's just going for a quick look. And this is the important part, John. You might have a dog with all of those things. So you might have a very strong prey drive dog that also absolutely loves dogs and people, that is actually a little bit nervy, but not afraid to follow it up and go and look. If you've got those sorts of things going on in your dog, and you generally see it in the sort of working breeds, collies generally, some spaniels, those kinds of instincts, some Labradors, terriers, it's like the ones that I see a lot are generally these really, really strong driven dogs. And you can't pigeonhole it too much, but if you've got a dog that's really driven, you're really going to have to work hard at how you're going to turn it around. But here's the really good news. If you're sitting there nodding and going, oh gosh, yeah, my dog's like that, that's brilliant. Why is that brilliant? It's brilliant because it means that you have got a dog that is sparky enough, bright enough to train them to do what you want. If you've got a dog that's highly motivated by things, what you need to make sure is that you are holding all of those cards. So if you've got a dog that has a strong hunting instinct, you make sure you've got something that matches it or betters it.
Yeah, that's
if they've got a high social drive. Yeah, if you've got a dog with high social drive, you've got to make sure you are more socially interesting. If you've got a sensitive dog, you could actually teach the dog that you're actually in control and the dog doesn't need to worry. And there's loads of, it's easy to say this, but there's loads of ways to do that. If you've got a brave and fearless dog, okay, you might have to step in and say, no, I want you to do this. But if you notice, all the things I'm saying here are nothing to do with confronting the dog.
Sure.
We are not talking about giving the dog a great big telling off. There is a huge difference between motivating a dog by saying, I've got this over here, or right, I'm going home, or look, I'll take over, it's fine, or no, you're not doing that, you're going to do this, to screaming at your dog, squashing it on the floor, having all those, those things. That's confrontation. We don't need confrontation. No, exactly. If you've got a brave and fearless dog and you confront it, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference. If you've got a sensitive and fearful dog and you confront it, it's probably going to bite you. So you can't take these instincts out of the dog. Let's turn them to our advantage.
How do we do that?
How do we do that? Now, that is the $1 million question. There are loads and loads and loads of things you can do once you know the kind of dog that you've got. Now, it's not usually as easy as, oh, well, I'll produce a toy. It could be. But again, we're talking about that small percentage of dogs. And I say small, it's probably bigger than you'd realise. But a lot of people have this problem where the dog's just not really bothered, not bothered about a toy, not bothered about, because they're going out a lot. What do you do about it? So first of all, if the dog is desperate to explore on a walk and you're keeping it on a lead all the time because you're worried it's going to rush off, then the dog is going to be extra desperate. You get frustration behaviour in there. You might get barking. You might get a dog that's very sort of tense on the lead. And you again go back to last week's podcast to learn about what to do about that. If you never, never, never let your dog have the opportunity to explore, you have set yourself up a problem. If you are aware that your dog has a problem and you've allowed it to rehearse the problem, so maybe you kind of put it to chance every time and then you're walking through the woods and the dog's off after a deer, or it meets some people and it goes running over, you've allowed it to practice. So that most people have then got their head in the hand saying, I don't know what to do. They might use a retractable lead. They sort of work. They sort of have a purpose. But here's what I use. I get a 10-meter soft webbing long line, first of all. Long lines are, they're so underestimated how useful they are. It becomes a dog remote control. What it is, you have a clip on the end, and it doesn't have to be webbing. If you've got a little dog, you can use washing line. If you've got no money, go down to the pound shop, buy a washing line. That's about 30 foot long, which is about 10 meters again. Tie that on your dog's collar, and instantly you've got this remote control. The dog will look at it at first and go, what is that? And they'll probably be walking along trying to sort of pick their feet. But before long, you've got a dog that enjoys their walk so much, they'll be like, what's this? What's this? And they won't be worried about the line. So that's the first thing to remember. It gives you security because your hands are off the dog. On a retractable lead, you see, you've still got the dog in your hand. Yeah. With a long line, you can let it trail on the ground. If you're very worried and you've got a very fast dog, I do advise just keep hold of the end. But the idea is not that the dog runs to the end of the line and pulls it tight. Okay. You are walking with the dog. Carry on, sorry.
And I'm going to say, so the line is on the floor. You're not actually holding it?
No, there's no handle on even if you buy the sort of training lines that you can get, there's no handles on them. And I talked to Roger Mugford about this, who is Dr. Roger Mugford, who designs lots and lots of dog training products. Absolutely brilliant, very innovative. And I talked to him about that, and I said, I use your long lines all the time. And he said, yeah. And we were talking about handles, and he said, no, I don't put a handle on it. And I said, I tell my owners not to put a handle on it either. And we both agreed that this is because the temptation is to just make it an extension of your lead. And it's not meant for that. It's meant to be a training aid.
Tie a big knot in.
So that probably doesn't make sense, but let me explain. So where you've got your dog on a long line, obviously the first thing your dog might do is try and rush off. So you're not going to want them to do that. So you want them to be able to walk next to you for even just a few paces while they have a little look around. So what you allow them is what's called the area of control. So area of control, it could be at the start only a couple of feet away from you, where you know that if you call your dog or waft something under its nose or do anything, the dog is kind of with you. Most people have an area of control in their head. They've got a rough idea by looking at the dog of how far away the dog can be before they think, right, he's not coming back at this point. It might be right next to your ankle. So, don't feel bad if it is. But that the minute the dog wavers out of that area, that you're going to have a struggle. So you start off with a line in your hand and the dog next to you, somewhere fairly not too distracting. You let the line drop, keep 1 foot on the line if you have to. But then as you start to move, you keep an eye on the dog. And as they start to move out of the area of control, you immediately call them, back away so the dog turns right round and comes back to you. If they don't turn right round and come back to you, don't worry. You've got the line. So the split second you've called them and you see them just go, no, which they do, like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sniffing. You immediately walk to the line, stand on the line, pick up the line, crouch down in a nice welcoming way. If you can't crouch, it doesn't matter, but stand up straight. Don't bend. And call the dog back and kind of bring the line in with the dog attached to it. And you make a big fuss of them. You tell them what a great dog they are. And then you stand up straight with your foot on the line so that they can't run off. And then as long as they're not pulling away, you wait till they relax and then you say, off you go. And you are controlling their freedom. So you're controlling them coming back. You're giving them a reward, whether they want it or not. You can offer it. You can offer food. You can offer a game with their toy. If they don't want it, okay, doesn't matter. But you're not letting them repeat the behaviour you don't want. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Here in Sweden, we use this to train the dogs to sniff blodspår, to follow tracks for tracking. That we use long.
Line. Yeah, a tracking line. I mean, I've got tracking lines they're slightly different. My tracking lines have got various things, sort of knots and things for me, like little indicators and stuff like that. A tracking line is when you want the dog to actually, when I learned tracking, you actually have it on a harness and the dog pulls you in the direction of the things that you want. With a long line, the idea is the dog doesn't feel any tension around their neck at all. So they literally just trail it along until they forget that it's there. But then all of a sudden, I used to call it the hand of God. The dog's there sniffling away at a rabbit hole or something. And it hears you go, come here, in a nice sort of type thing. And the dog goes, yeah, in a minute. I'm just sniffing this rabbit. But all of a sudden, even though you're sort of 5 feet, 10 feet behind them, they feel this kind of movement on their collar and they have to turn around and they have to come back. So they are not given the opportunity to ignore anything that you say. So that is the real important part, is that you're on it very quickly. You give a clear command, you pick up the line, you encourage the dog to come back and you try and motivate them. Of course you do, because that's the whole point. But you don't allow the kind of yes in a minute thing. It means you can stay calm too. Sorry, carry on.
Doesn't the line snag on things on the ground? I'm just thinking, if I'm doing this in the woods, there's so many things that it would snag on. And that would sort of yank the dog.
Well, no. I mean, the idea is that when you're starting, obviously this is a training session, you need to choose a walk that isn't in the woods for a start, because if you've got that, yes, you'll get caught around brambles and briars and it would just be a nightmare. You start somewhere fairly open, and you start somewhere where there aren't many distractions, because you want to make it easy for the dog. If you make it hard for the dog and for yourself first time, you're just going to fail, and you want to set yourself up for success, don't you? So you start off in an area where you can, there's no roads or anything like that, but you've got the line, you can bring the dog back. If you've got a problem in the woods, there are paths through the woods. I mean, we've got a woods near us and there's some very wide paths. So I would pick the wider pathways, and I don't let the dog get out of my area of control until I can trust them to come back each time. So they wouldn't get snagged because they wouldn't be going off into the woods hunting, because I wouldn't allow it until I've got some control over them. By the time I've got that control over them, I can direct where they go a little bit better. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, so absolutely.
You do have to be careful. A long line it's not magic. It does have drawbacks. You have to be careful not to get caught yourself or anyone that's walking with you. You don't want them knocked over or get their feet caught up or anything like that. You need to have a line that's light enough so the dog isn't that aware of it. But sometimes you want to start with a heavy line so they can feel it, and then gradually get to a lighter line, so that you can start with a heavy webbing line, then end up with a washing line, then shorten the washing line, then you end up with just the lead on the dog's collar, and you're done. So there are drawbacks with it, but you are training, and you're training to a command, and that's the really important part, your command. So think of, every command you've ever used with your dog, which is probably things like, come here, come on, this way, dog's name, Fido, Willow, come on, blah, 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 blah. And all of those things, what do you think they mean to the dog by the end once you haven't trained it right? What do they end up meaning?
Oh, it's just a blurred mess.
It's a blurred mess.
Yeah.
Or at worst, it means...
You're in trouble.
Run away.
Yeah,
you're in trouble. Run away, because I'm going to come and get you when we're going home.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, you need a cue, a separate... one of the things that I did when I did dog training was that to make sure that you wrote down every cue you used, and to distribute that in the family so everyone in the family uses the same cue. I can see you nodding, Karen.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. I quite often do that for my families, and where I've got where we're teaching, I always say for recall, if you've got a recall problem, think of a new word. Think of a new word that no one else has used yet. And I'm a big fan of, it doesn't matter what word you say. I'm actually quite tempted to do an experiment with my dogs and just teach them colours. Red, blue, green, for different things. Not because it's going to be useful to me, because it won't. It'll be a pain, because I'll have to remember what's what. But to prove to people that the dog doesn't learn the meaning of the word until you attach that meaning.
That's why...
Otherwise, I've trained dogs in Polish. I've trained dogs in French. I've trained dogs in Spanish. That I don't speak any of those languages. Oh, I speak French, but what I mean is I don't necessarily know what the Polish word for good dog is. I do now, but... And I'm not going to say it because all my Polish listeners are going to say my accent's terrible. But it's really, really important that you just disassociate this. Come here, you little beep, 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 beep. It doesn't mean anything to the dog. You've given it the meaning. So let's think, say banana. It doesn't matter, I use a whistle. But it's got to be a brand new word. Yeah, a whistle. You could use a whistle. The reason I don't advocate whistles for general use is really because I feel that if the owner... It depends. If there's lots of people walking the dog, a whistle's very useful, or lots of dogs. If the owner loses the whistle, they're a bit stuck. And that's my only thing. I normally say if you're going to use a whistle, buy two at the same time. So you've got a spare. But
or use your fingers.
Or use your fingers. Yeah, or use your fingers.
That's what I get.
Oh,
yeah,
crikey.
A wolf whistle.
Oh, there you are, John. You see, you're fine. I've got a friend who does a really loud wolf whistle, but no, that's something I can't do. So... yeah, think of a new word. It's not associated. Then take your dog out with the long line attached, your amazing remote control. Set aside the time, though. This is something you can do on your normal walk. It's quite easy to do, but try not to pick your walk like John says, where you're going to be somewhere where it's going to get tangled or there's lots of people, because you'll end up getting yourself all wrapped up. Teach the dog. that your new recall word, I mean, I tend to say come like that, but that's because I don't use here, because here sounds like heel, and I teach that for something else. That's the only reason. And once I've done that, I repeat until I am so predictably going to pick up the line and bring the dog back that the dog eventually goes, well, the quicker I do this, then I get more freedom, and then I get to go and walk again and look around. And if I get my nose stuck in a smell, yes, it's hard because I have to kind of half listen to the person standing over there. But if I don't listen, I get pulled back to them anyway. And if I do listen, I come back quicker. That means they say, go on, then off you go again. So I get more freedom. So you're controlling not the dog coming back. You're controlling their freedom. So it's counterintuitive. Yeah, you want them to come back, but you want them to come back because then they know they get more freedom afterwards. So if you've got a dog that's desperate to go hunting, then that's the best reward they could have, isn't it? Rather like the lead work that we talked about last week. Yes, John.
I was going to say, in the when they come back to you and training a new command, surely also we have to think about what actually rewards the dog when they come back to you. For some dogs, the reward will be, I mean, the Bassets love it when I scratch their neck. And in the past, I've had dogs that have been, super, have you got that piece of sausage that I know you keep in your pocket for those special occasions?
Yeah, and then this goes back to what we talked about at the very start, which is what kind of a dog do you have? If you have a dog that is an absolute scavenger, then you make sure that you've got in your pocket or in your bum bag or whatever you got with you, something really good. I mean, like chicken, sausage, whatever you're okay with giving your dog that smells strong. Don't just take out the gravy bone biscuits and hope that's going to work, because it's not going to work. If they pick up a dead rabbit, you've got a bit of a job on your hands. So, make sure you've got really high value food if you've got that kind of a dog. If you've got a very sociable dog, maybe you're just trundling along, you've had a long day at work and you're a bit tired and you're just sort of trundling along, and then they see someone in the distance, they're going to think, oh, that you're just boring and I see you all day. Look at that person over there. So that's when you start to work on how interesting you are. Running, noisy, unpredictable humans are very interesting. That's why kids tend to get the dogs sort of leaping up at them all the time. And high-pitched noises. So if you're a guy, with a deep voice, try and, be a bit light-hearted about it and, move around, run away from the dog, try and get them to chase after you. You can still run away from them on a long line because you run down the length of the line. So, they're not going to get any further away. But you play these games with them to make them think, I'm keep an eye on you because you're quite fun. So again, if you've got that kind of dog, you could do those sorts of games. Be careful if you've got a very strong chaser. I did have one client whose dog nearly brought her down like a deer. So you do have to be careful. We didn't know that the dog would do that first time ever, and it was very interesting. She thought it was hilarious. I was a little bit more concerned, but make yourself interesting. If it's a social issue, make yourself interesting, but don't allow the dog to get away with goodbye, I'm going. That's why the long line is there, is to prevent errors as well as to repeat the training. And you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And by the end of a walk like that, believe me, you will both be incredibly fit and tired.
But what happens, Karen? Because I train, because I breed dogs and I have them from a very young age, of course, and I train them right from the beginning, and I know the importance of recall, and I train and train and train. And then remember, before Christmas, I was out walking in the woods and Winnie turned and she ran. And I lost her for 2.5 hours, and I ruined my vocal cords for 2 months. And, I have trained and trained and trained recall with her, and she just didn't come back. What do you do then?
Yeah, well, you alluded to that earlier, didn't you, about the error margin? I think it's sometimes very difficult when they sometimes catch you out, and you might have had a really reliable recall, but you just don't know. Something might spook the dog, or they might suddenly catch a whiff of a smell, or the other dogs might do something that means your dog runs away. I had a puppy that had a fantastic recall, got chased all the way back to the car park by a couple of really horrible dogs that came shooting out of the woods once. There's nothing would have got that dog to come back to me because he was terrified. So, these things can happen. The bottom line is, if you're going to let your dog off the lead somewhere, you've got to be sure that if there is that error margin pop up, you're not going to lose them across the road or anything like that. And I certainly, as soon as I see the slight inkling, because it might have been coming on for a while, you just don't know, you might not have noticed, inkling that the dog is a little bit slow on their recall, I immediately put them back on the long line for a few walks, just to kind of boost my confidence and to remind them, of what I really want. Remember, dogs have an issue with retention of information. They don't always remember everything all the time. So it's just like we don't. Sometimes you're scratching your head trying to remember what was it. Dogs sometimes do that too. So don't leave too much to chance. You've got to get a right balance here.
How long?
The other thing I wanted to say. Sorry,
I was
carry
just
on.
going to say, before we move on with this, how long should the line be?
I would say 10 meters is certainly the stock training line you can buy.
Okay.
It's about right. 30 to 40 feet, about 10, 15 meters. Any longer than that, it becomes a pain. I always choose webbing. If you can't get a proper webbing training line, because they're about, I don't know, over here about 10, 12 pounds and not that much, you can buy webbing. You can buy it from the DIY shop, a hardware store. You can buy it on eBay. You can buy all colours. You can get lovely pink ones I've got before now for clients, and you can get different widths. The reason I like webbing, get polypropylene webbing. It doesn't soak up the water if you're on a wet day. You can throw it in the washing machine at the end of the day and it comes out absolutely fine. It's very, very simple, lightweight. It doesn't burn your hands if you have to stop the dog at speed. That's very strong. I just think that you get your kit right, and again, I don't want to get too technical. Get the kit right so that you don't hurt your hand, so that it's easy to use. You keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't trip anyone up. But the principles involved are so, so useful. And I've got some video on YouTube, which I'll have to find and resurrect, of, I think it's 5 dogs that I was walking at one go. One of them was mine. The others weren't mine. 3 or 4 of them are on long lines because they're not my dogs and I'm not supposed to take them off the lead. They were in an enclosed space, but nevertheless, they didn't know that. And if I felt like I was losing control of any single one of them, I could call them, immediately go to the line, gently put my foot on it and bring the dog back. A safety aspect of putting your foot on the line. If your dog is running at full tilt and you put your foot on the line, there are 2 big risks. One is that it's going to yank you over. 2 is that it's going to yank the dog. We don't want that to happen. Yeah. If you know you've got a fast dog, hold on to the line so that doesn't happen. If you're making a choice between the risk of the dog running onto the main road, however, and getting yanked a bit on a line, you need to make that choice immediately. So it's an important safety aspect, but if the dog's going to run in front of a lorry, if you don't quickly stop it, then what do you do? But if you've got your dog radar switched on and you're keeping an eye on it, it shouldn't get to that point at all. So just a kind of safety aspect there.
Is there anything else that we've not touched on with recall?
Well, there's a lot of things that I would say, there's a lot of procedures there that, I've written a handout about this and you're welcome to go onto my website and choose that and download it. And I'll actually link to it from the blog. It's only $2.99, which is, I think, about $4 American dollars. And it's not a lot. And that goes through the procedure and it goes through this in more detail. I think you've got to really get your cue from what kind of dog have I got and why is it? And once you've got that, once you've assessed your dog a little bit, all of these things will become absolutely clear. They really will. And repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat until the dog is literally so used to you. Call, dog comes back. Call, dog comes back. Call, dog comes back, whether it wants to or not, that they just start doing it. And they will start to do that on a single walk. Within 15 minutes or so, you will see the dog just kind of turn around and come back to you.
Brilliant. So if you go away and give this a try, we would love to hear how this goes. I've not used a line like this. I've only used a hunting line before. So I'd be really curious to hear people's experience with this, and particularly in different kind of environments. Where do you do this? Do you do this in the park? For me, I've got a bit of roads around here and then the woods, and the woods are lots of trees. So I think I'd have to go to some big outdoor area to try this, like a park or something.
Yeah, you might. What you could do, this is where an extendable lead actually is quite handy. As long as, obviously, I know everyone listening knows this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You wouldn't use a long line near a road. You just wouldn't, because the dog would be straight onto the road. But if you had an extendable lead, you could use it for this, but you have to be aware. 2 things really. 1, the lead is in your hand, so the dog's going to be aware of it. And secondly, a retractable lead always has tension.
Yeah, don't.
So if you wanted to use use an extendable lead. Obviously, you could use it at short lead next to the roadside, in which case you do your lead walking training from last week. And as soon as you get somewhere like the woods, the lead will lift out of the way of most scrub on the ground. If you lock it out, so in other words, you pull a little bit of extension, push the button across so that it's locked but loose. Do you know what I mean? So you've actually got no tension again on the dog's neck. You can still use it for this purpose. But the idea is you don't have it retracting all the time, because the dog will know that there's something around their neck all the time. So just moving on from that, and to sort of summarise, because I can't possibly cover it all. I'd love to. I'll probably end up here all day. When you then get to the point where you're using the line and the dog's turning around, because remember, they have to turn away from the thing to come back to you. So once they've turned away, then that's part of the recall. They're coming back to you. They're getting to your feet. Then you might think, well, they'll do it when they're on the line. But as soon as I take the line off, the dog knows they're not on the line. So as I briefly mentioned already, you start off with a line that's really comfortable and easy to use, and reasonable size. It's not that heavy, but that's the idea. Then when you get to the point where you think, well, my area of control is now almost the length of the line. That's great, as long as you haven't got a fast dog that's going to dash off. You can look at that and think, okay, so my dog can get up to about 10 metres away. That's really good. You can then swap the line for something lighter, or you can start to shorten the line that you've got. So swap it over for something a lot lighter that the dog's not so aware of. They'll suddenly feel like they're free. They won't realise, it's trailing on the ground, so they won't feel it. They might be a little bit aware of it, but a very light washing line, plastic washing line is very hard to sort of feel. They will then suddenly think, I'm free, I'm off the line, and you might see them decide to dash off again, in which case you repeat the training with the lighter line, and then you start to use a lighter line again, like baler twine, something like that, and then you start to snip bits off it, and then you give the dog the freedom that they really want. So you work your way through it, and it's systematic. It's common sense really, but it's systematic. If you suddenly do something, the dog's going to notice a big difference between line on, line off. So you just fade it out gradually, and that's the best thing to do.
Well, I think it's time for the news roundup, Karen. So what have we got?
Oh, I just found a little story that I thought was quite funny. A woman in England whose diamond ring went missing was looking everywhere for it, and it's a family heirloom. It's really, really, valuable, and couldn't find it anywhere. So she started to use a metal detector around the house, and every time she went near the dog, Barney, her puppy, the metal detector started to beep. So she moved it across the puppy's belly, and the puppy had actually eaten the ring, and she found it with a metal detector inside his tummy. Can you believe it?
Oh my God. So she took him to the vet?
She took him to the vet. The vets had to operate to get it out. He's perfectly fine now, he's fine. But yeah, she said, he could have, if she hadn't have found it, he could have died, because obviously it could have formed an obstruction. But I just can't believe that this idea of this person doing a metal detector on their dog and then it going beep like that. So if you're worried that your dog's eaten something metallic, no, I'm not advising you to do it. But it just seemed like a really crazy thing, but a clever idea, At least it's a halfway to getting them x-rayed, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you've got any funny stories about things, this is a funny, serious story because of the potential for the blockage there. But if you've got a funny story about something that your dog's done, we'd love to hear. We'd love to have some things sharing from you. And what we've got, Karen, we've got another dog bark this week.
We've got a bark. Oh, how lovely. Let's see, who've we got? Oh, is this Georgina? Yes, this is Georgina's. Okay, so it's not Georgina barking, I should point out, while she's screaming at the podcast. This is Elle and Garbo. And I do know, Georgina, I do hope the dogs are all right, because I know Georgina had a bit of a crisis while she was away yesterday. It wasn't anything to do with her. It wasn't her fault, but the dog's very good at turning on the hob. And, and they had a bit of an accident, but the dog's fine. I mean, the dog wasn't hurt or anything, but the hob went on and there was something on top of the hob. So I hope you're all right. But thank you for sending in the bark. Shall we hear it?
Yeah, here we go. That was completely different to last week's bark.
It was, wasn't it?
A very energized bark, that one. What kind of breed is it?
That sounds like well, Garbo is a is a Weimaraner, and Elle is a Hungarian Vizsla. And, they're obviously, I think she said they were in the car having a go at somebody going by. And I've got another one from her, which we'll play next week, I think, if I can find it, which is, I won't tell you.
All right.
Bit more podcast interactive.
And if you have your dog barking, and you can get it onto some kind of recorded format, you can send that to podcast@karenwild.uk. Did I say the co there? podcast@karenwild.co.uk. And if you have any questions or comments about how you've been getting on with lead training or recall, email those over. You can also contact Karen on Twitter, and that's twitter.com/wildpaw.
Yeah, and we had some really good questions this week. A couple of people asking me to find various toys and things like that, which I've gone on my little hunt for. So anything like that, come on Twitter, give us a message, because we love hearing from you, and sometimes I put them in the podcast. So if you want a mention, or you want a mention for your dog, let me know, and they become famous on our podcast.
I think what we'd like to do, we'd like to have a 1 week when we do a question and answer show, where we just we'll save up a bunch of questions, and we'll get some answers from Karen. I think that would be a really nice way of getting people involved. And if you'd like to get involved more in the show, as well as sending in your contributions, it would be really good if you help promote us on Twitter to build the community. Or if you have a blog, a doggy blog, give us a link, let us know where you are, who you are. We would love to grow the community of people that care about helping dogs live more safely and in harmony with their people.
Absolutely right. I've had a couple actually that I'm going to post on the blog this week, so look out for those. One is all about finding a good dog walker, which was written by Linda, and she is a professional dog walker, and I get asked this all the time, how do I know they're any good? So she's done me a great blog on that. I've also got a thing about collies and walking. And when I say collies and walking, it's the collie stalking idea, and that's from Lorna, and that is absolutely superb. If you like collies, you're going to love that. So do keep popping back to the blog. I will let you know on Twitter when it's up, but please do have a look, because it is just awesome.
All right, Karen, I think that's enough for this week. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks a lot, John. Bye.
Bye.